The war on drugs started in 1971 with Richard Nixon. Republicans don't want to talk about that. He was a Republican the last time I checked. The war on drugs started June 17th, 1971, when a Republican named Richard Nixon declared his war on drugs in front of Congress. So if we want to deal with that, we need to go back there and come forward.
Black people have been, by and large, Democrat since the late 1960s. A recent Pew Research poll shows that only 4% of Black registered voters would vote for a Republican candidate. While Black Republicans are few, the study found they tend to be younger than Black Democrats. A Black Republican group called Project 21 believes the sway of young Black voters comes from the lack of upward mobility, poverty, crime, and other social ills. Project 21 is a network of Black leaders from across the nation and have identified 10 critical areas for reform and are offering 57 recommendations to remove barriers blocking Blacks. I don't like the word Blacks, but that's okay. Black people. Craig DeLuz, a Project 21 member and founder of Uncommon Sense Media Group, is joining us to explain their blueprint for a better deal for Black America plan. Hello, Mr. DeLuz. Welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for being here. I had a chance to look over this blueprint for a better deal for Black America, and I would be remiss if I didn't start off by saying that this is an extensive report of super anti-Black, and I would even say white supremacist talking points that are filled with completely absurd notions that want to roll back all of the racial progress that we've made in terms of civil rights and advancement. So what do you have to say for this plan and why you believe the suggestions that you've made, such as trying to ban critical race theory, get rid of all kinds of civil rights protections, is actually the right plan for Black America?
Okay, well, first of all, your mischaracterization of the plan is, and as well, by the way, of Project 21, just goes to demonstrate how little you actually probably spent on it or on Project 21. First of all, Project 21 is not a Republican group. It's a group of people who
think differently. We didn't say Republican.
Than the left-wing paradigm. In other words, the Black community is just like every other community in that not everyone thinks alike. Right, we come from different. We have different beliefs. We have different. We have a variety of beliefs. We have a variety of positions on issues. Oftentimes, depending on what that issue is, the challenge we have, in particular, as a Black community, is monolithically we only come at it from one perspective. And we've lost, unfortunately, this is unfortunately an issue on both the right and the left. We've lost the idea of being able to talk about public policy nuance. And when we start talking about public policy nuance, we start to take a look at all of the items or perspectives from both sides and look to see which ones are going to be best for the Black community. What we've wound up with is our policymakers and our politicians only support those on the left. And so you wind up with a Democratic Party who says we don't have to do anything or address any issues of the Black community. And you wind up with a Republican Party that says, well, they're always going to vote Democrat, so we really don't have to address any issues within the Black community.
I can agree with you about the Republican Party aspect, but I think that they are actually quite hostile to the Black community. They aren't just indifferent to our community. I think it's interesting because, hold on one second. Well, I didn't cut you off. 1 second.
Here's the point that
Hold on 1 second. I didn't cut you off, sir. I didn't cut you off, sir. Thank you. One thing I found interesting about the report is that the report talks about, or it starts that there have been failures of the Biden-Harris administration in terms of their policies. But the statistics that are outlined throughout the reports, like, for instance, statistics about homicide rate, statistics about a number of things, are 2019 and 2020. That's when President Trump was actually in office, and he had 4 years of policies to make improvements for the Black community. So how do you explain how President Biden is responsible for the failures of the Trump administration policies in 2020?
Well, first of all, understand that the executive summary that was written as it came forward, you look at the put it this way, what the numbers were in 2020, which, by the way, were 2020 and 2019, the numbers have increased since then. And if you look at where those numbers, whether it's crime, whether it's poverty, where those numbers have gotten worse are in particular are in areas that are run by Democrats in major urban inner cities like San Francisco, like Oakland, like Los Angeles, like Chicago, like New York. And these are areas that have been run by Democrats not just for a few years, but for generations. You look across the country and you look at where liberal policies are put in place, right? Crime is the highest, unemployment is the highest, economic opportunity is the lowest, quality of education is the lowest. I'm not here saying the Republicans have all the answer, the conservatives have all the answers, but here's what I know. I know the Democrats have demonstrated that they simply do not.
Well, that's not true that crime is highest and a number of things that you asserted were the highest in Democratic areas. But
just because you say it's not true doesn't mean it's not true.
Okay, just because you say it's true doesn't mean it's true. So where we go with that? But one second. Let's talk about one of the assertions. It's a big part of this plan talks about crime. One of the most disturbing and the reason why I characterize it as racist and white supremacist notions was it specifically says in this plan that black people are as criminal or more criminal, and that's why we see the kind of disparities in the way that black people are treated in the disparities. Do you believe that black people are more prone to criminal behavior? Do you agree with that assertion?
You clearly did not read the report.
I did read it.
But what it will tell you is this, is that, and this is, by the way, this is true of every ethnicity. People who generally commit crimes against their own. In other words, the number one committer of crimes against black people are black people. And that's the same with whites. That's the same with Latinos, right? That's what that is pointing out. My question is, with all of these folks who are trying to be smart on crime by decriminalizing crime and putting criminals back on the streets, they're more worried about black criminals than they are about black crime victims.
I mean, to be clear, that's a completely different point to say that there is higher interracial. Hold on. That's completely different to say that the number one perpetrators of crime against black people are black people, as opposed to saying that black people are more criminal. If we look at, for instance, I
agree with you, but what you're saying the report says is not what it said.
That is what it said, but that's okay if you don't want to acknowledge that, or if you don't believe that, then I'm glad that you repudiate that aspect of the report. But we do have situations like, for instance, how black people are disproportionately stopped for weed offenses, marijuana offenses, as opposed to white people when black people and white people have the same usage of drugs. One of the things that your plan calls for is for not decriminalizing marijuana. Can you explain that position?
Well, first of all, I think they'd understand that overall throughout history, I mean, until recently with marijuana, there has only been one drug that has been legalized for recreational use, and that drug has been alcohol. I don't think that we do our community we don't provide them any additional benefit by legalizing the use of marijuana. What we were promised in the state of California, for example, was when we legalized marijuana that we would see an end to crime. The exact opposite has happened. What we've seen is an underground black market of marijuana and cannabis is actually taking over the market, right? In other words, people have not changed whether or not they're smoking it. What's happened is they also haven't changed where they bought it. The only difference is that they're not going to jail for possessing it.
That is good, because black people were disproportionately going to jail for possessing marijuana, despite the fact that they don't have a higher incidence of using marijuana. But let's talk about another major part of your plan, which is critical race theory. This is the boogeyman of conservatives. And I found a lot of really preposterous assertions in here as well. But let me just ask you first and foremost, do you believe that racism against black people exists in this country? And do you believe that systemic racism exists in this country?
Well, first of all, let's talk about what critical race theory is. And I recognize and I understand that.
We can get to that. Hold on one second. Mr. DeLuz, we can get to that. Hold on. But I asked you a specific question. Respectfully, can you answer my question? And then we can get to what your understanding of critical race theory is.
Do I believe that racism exists? Yes, I do believe that racism exists. Do I believe that systemic racism exists? No, I do not believe that systemic racism exists. I believe that we need to take a look at, I mean, one of the challenges we have is that people who promote critical race theory want to act as if we are exactly where we were from the day that slavery ended. And that is just not the case. We are the freest, most educated, and most prosperous peoples of African descent in the world. Now, is everything where it should be? Are we exactly where we should be striving to be? No, we're not there yet. But what we should do is recognize where we are, recognize the success that we have had, and recognize that staying on the path where we are is exactly what's going to get us to where we need to be. But teaching policies or teaching things in school that teach students that if you're white, you are an oppressor. If you are black, you are oppressed. And the only way you can be successful is if your oppressor lets you be successful. Where they talk about things like proximity to whiteness, saying that, well, if you are successful, if you are college educated, and if you've been married to one person and have children with that one person, well, that's because of your proximity to whiteness. This sort of stuff is utter madness. And this is the sort of stuff that is not going to create racial unity. It's in fact going to create racial division. And that's exactly what it's doing.
Well, first of all, we've had racial division in this country since the beginning of time. I mean, we did come here as kidnapped, enslaved people. So this whole notion that critical race theory is creating something is really absurd. And it's actually creating a lot of hysteria by all the mischaracterizations of critical race theory.
It's not hysteria at all. I sit on a school board. I've sat on a school board for 18 years, and I've seen them work to try and implement this stuff. And I'm telling you right now, this stuff is divisive. And as we're trying to bring people together, you know, we've worked in our school district to try and do diversity training, to try and do what we call resiliency training, cultural competency with our staff. And it wasn't until this racist, anti-racism training started to come in that we started to have issues and divisions and concerns like this.
Oh, anti-racism is the problem as opposed to racism. That's a very interesting assertion, but I'm going to bring in my panel to see if they have any questions for you, Mr. DeLuz. I'm going to start off with our professor, Mr. Michael Imhotep. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I've been going through looking at some of this, and first of all, what you're saying about critical race theory is blatantly false, and then you want to reinstate Donald Trump's divisive, combating race and sexual stereotyping executive order. That's ridiculous. But the question I have is, if we look, for instance, at the article from Yahoo News, do Republicans or Democratic states have more crime? And they talk about how 8 of the 10 states with the highest murder rates per 100,000 are Republican states and states that voted for Donald Trump. Explain to me how Republican policies for fighting crime are going to be more beneficial for African Americans than Democrats. And I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, but I sure as hell ain't stupid. And I know when people are trying to snow job our people as well. But explain that to me. And then I got a follow up to deal with marijuana, because if you study the history of why marijuana was made illegal, it largely goes back to Harry J. Ansling in 1937, who was a white supremacist who targeted African Americans and who lied in front of Congress about the effects of marijuana as well. But we can get to that later. Go ahead and answer the first question.
Okay, I'll use the state of California as an example. In the early 90s, in the state of California, we passed a number of laws which actually, which were included mandatory minimums for various different crimes. We started to institute things like going after people who were involved in violent crime, people who were involved in the drug trade, and what we found was for over 20 years we saw a decrease, we saw a cut in crime, in violent crime, and in property crime. And then in the early 2010s, about the time that we got our then Attorney General Kamala Harris, came in with this idea of, well, we're going to institute policies that are smart on crime. And as a part of smart on crime, what we're going to do is we're going to take things that are crimes, major crimes, felonies, and we're going to call them misdemeanors. And then not only are we now going to then call them misdemeanors, we're going to take the people who committed those crimes, we're going to take them out of state prison, and we're going to put them into county jails. Now, as a result of that, we've seen a number of things happen. Number one, the people who went from state prison to county forced then people who were in the county jails out onto the streets. On top of that, in many cases, you had people who were in county jails, which, by the way, are built for up to a year's stay. They're not built for long term, for more than a year. So you saw people who were going into county jails that didn't have rehabilitation programs, weren't set up for long term, and weren't set up for the populations that they had. And so then they started releasing prisoners. So now let's see. We've decriminalized crime. Oh, we got rid of bail. So now that we've gotten rid of bail, when you arrest somebody for committing a crime, we're now just going to release them onto the streets, where there are multiple stories.
You're talking about bail reform. You're talking about bail reform. Right. Because African Americans were disproportionately harmed when they couldn't afford bail and white people could.
Let me jump in because this is running a little long. But let me just clarify.
Remember, the war on drugs started in 1971 for Reecie Nixon. Republicans don't want to talk about that. He was a Republican the last time I checked. The war on drugs started June 17, 1971, when a Republican named Reecie Nixon declared his war on drugs in front of Congress. So if we want to deal with that, we need to go back there and come forward. Go ahead.
Pause, fellas, pause. Is my mic working? Is my mic on? Can y'all hear me? Okay, thank you very much. All right. Let me just fact check one thing because Vice President Kamala Harris was mentioning. Y'all know I don't play about her. Actually, it wasn't her initiative. It was safety realignment that brought about the difference between state prisons and local prisons and all that good stuff. But let's move on to another question because we got other people that want to get questions in. So Kelly, you're up next.
I didn't even have to ask this.
Y'all had 5 minutes back and forth. Kelly, can you go ahead with your question, please?
Sure. So we only covered 2 of these topics in this manifesto, blueprint, what have you, and those were the crime and the CRT. I want to focus on CRT only because it delves into another area, which is specifically education, not just ideologies in general. I need to know why you think learning about history is destructive. Because at the end of the day, critical race theory has been inflated to mean a whole bunch of things. At the end of the day, it really is a legal concept, but what it has been incorporated into as far as education is concerned is really correcting the wrongs that have been taught to myself and generations after me and setting the record straight, such as the enslaved were not just immigrants that came over to America from Africa. That is part of critical race theory in a lot of jurisdictions. Native Americans were not just giving people turkeys in a cornucopia during the Mayflower. That's part of critical race theory. You understand what I'm saying? So I need to know what is woke. Why is that even being demonized? Why is it that whenever it comes to Black history or critical aspects of Black history, that gets shut down for the sake of, frankly, white guilt?
Okay.
Before you answer that, is my mic on? Mr. DeLuz, I want to be respectful to you, so I just want to give you a heads up. We have one more panelist ask you a question. So if you can keep it relatively brief so that we can get the last person in and then move on to the next segment, I would really appreciate it. I don't want to have to cut you off, so I'm just telling you up front. Thank you.
So first of all, let's understand that I think people on both sides are conflating what critical race theory is. I am not opposed to the idea of teaching our history, good and bad, in particular, and also when it comes to the issue of dealing with the issue of race and the history of African Americans. I know when I grew up, when I went to school, we didn't cover it the way we needed to. My point here is that what you're talking about, teaching and talking about the history, is not what critical race theory does, or at least it's not all that it does. And that's the problem. Is there are a lot of things. And by the way, critical race theory, at least I can only speak for California, has not been passed as a curriculum in any school district. Now, aspects of it,
because it's not a curriculum,
points of it have been put in place in various different places by various different instructors throughout the country. I'm just saying, my point is that those are the things that we need to be talking about and addressing. Talking about our history, not telling kids, well, if you're white, you're oppressed and you need to be ashamed of your whiteness. And that's the sort of stuff.
Respectfully, sir, not one teacher on this earth has ever said that to a white baby. No one. And I am friends with plenty of teachers. I've sat on boards. No black teaper has ever told a white baby, you are the great-grandchild of my oppressor. That does not happen.
There are teachers who have done that.
We're going to move on to the last panelist. Thank you. Please, with your question for Mr. DeLuz.
I'll let him answer her question. That's okay. I'll let him answer the question.
Interrupted, but the individual who's supposed to answer the questions gets interrupted.
Let's rewind, because let's fact check. I asked you to keep it relatively brief. I gave you a chance to answer it. It was a couple of minutes last I checked, but we do have another segment. We have other people holding on. I wish we could have an entire knockdown, drag-out fight about this for 2 hours, but this is a news program with other segments. So, Matt, please, with your question.
I would call it news, but okay.
My question is, why do you want to end consent decrees when they're based upon evidence that these are cities and municipalities that have had, disparate policing? It seems to me that if you are a supporter of the police, you should also be able to be someone who has a check on them, right? If you say we're going to hold the citizens accountable, we're going to hold the police accountable. Consent decrees are based on evidence. So why would it be part of your policy platform that you want to repeal those?
I have to be honest, in particular, the section on consent decrees, I'm not particularly familiar with. I do believe in law enforcement accountability. Things like body cameras are vitally important and should be instituted for all law enforcement, in part because it not only helps keep police accountable, but in many cases, it's actually helped exonerate them or show exactly what happened in many, many cases. It's not the complete story, but it does tell part of the story. And I apologize that I don't know more about the consent decrees.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuz, for acknowledging that instead of BSing your way through that segment. To be honest, you sound just slightly more reasonable than this document. And I listened to it and I was aghast at many of the assertions. But we do agree on body cameras because that has been instrumental in bringing justice to light. And to your point, if the cop is innocent, then it will show that as well. So, Mr. DeLuz, thank you so much for your time, coming into the Lion's Den and giving us your perspective on the Project 21 group. Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
All right.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Your money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, so that was Reecie sitting in for Roland. Also want to check out the Project 21, their blueprint. What is it called here? Just a second. Blueprint for a Better Deal for Black America. Project 21 Black Leadership Network. Black America. Okay, that's what this census is called. And now, just reading the executive summary, I knew it was BS when I started reading the executive summary. In 2020, Black overwhelmingly voted for President Joe Biden in hopes he would push policies that would address the growing and diverse needs of their community. 18 months into President Biden's term, Blacks are more than a little disappointed. Rather than the centrist pro-growth and anti-crime policies they've been promised, Blacks have found that their personal situation in large part is worse than it was before Biden became president. And racism isn't the issue. Instead, crippling government policy is the real barrier for Blacks today. Okay. Now, what they don't want, then they say over the next year, the national debate has focused, over the last year, the national debate has focused far more on the interests of echo and woke warriors rather than kitchen table issues like job creation and low energy costs. 10 million jobs have been created under the Biden-Harris administration. 10 million jobs are created, 3.7% unemployment rate. The Biden administration has pushed expanding the safety net, enshrining critical race theory in the military, eco-alarmism, and abandoning American southern border. They're not abandoning. This is bullshit. That's what this is. They put a black face on bullshit. That's what they did. Blacks aren't just ignored by today's priorities. They are harmed. Inflation, crime in their neighborhoods. But, you know, now he talked about, to show you how duplicitous this is, instead of, it said anti-crime policies, rather than the centrist pro-growth anti-crime policies they've been promised, Blacks have found blah, blah, blah. Okay. What he doesn't say is like the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. He doesn't say no Republicans voted for the bill in the House of Representatives. And the bill passed the House of Representatives by a vote of 220 to 212 in March of 2021. No Republicans voted for the bill. And then the Black Republican, Senator Tim Scott, blocked the bill in the Senate. See, this is why you can't slick a can of oil. You're talking to somebody who knows what happens, who knows what happened. Republicans blocked the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. So how are you going to blame Democrats for that? Then he talks about inflation. Well, no Republicans voted for the Inflation Reduction Act, which will help Americans, which will give cost savings on energy costs, healthcare costs, things like this to fight inflation. No Republicans in the House or the Senate voted for the Inflation Reduction Act. No Republicans in the House or the Senate voted for the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, which saved the American economy. Okay. Now, lastly, because I have to get out of here. Obviously, the people that wrote this nonsense, which we've talked about a number. This document from whitehouse.gov goes through and breaks down step by step, policy by policy, how the policies of the Biden-Harris administration are helping African Americans. I encourage everybody to read this and then go read that nonsense for Project 21. This was dated November 6th, 2022. It was first updated in October of 2021. This is the most recent update. It's over 22 pages. The Biden-Harris administration advances equity and opportunity for Black Americans and communities across the country. One of the reasons why many African Americans are frustrated is because they're getting information from the wrong places and don't even this document exists, and they're listening to Simple Simon people on social media pushing propaganda who don't do research and don't understand policy. And they're trying to push for things like we want race-specific policies, but race-specific policies are illegal at the federal level and illegal in most states. That's Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Non-Discrimination in Federally Assisted Programs, Section 601. But those people don't do research, so they don't know things like this. economic opportunity for Black families and communities. It talks about how the American Rescue Plan has helped African Americans. It deals with things like how 1 million African American children were lifted out of poverty by the child tax credit, which is part of the American Rescue Plan. Even though that has expired, you can get that back. You got to pass it in the House and pass it in the Senate. Okay, maybe you could pick up a few Republicans in the House who will vote for the bill, make it a standalone bill, and get it passed in the Senate. Lowering energy costs. The Biden-Harris administration's vital policies and programs include lowering energy costs and creating economic opportunities through the Inflation Reduction Act. It goes through, breaks all this stuff down, making home efficiency upgrades more affordable, creating economic opportunities and good paying jobs. We haven't talked about the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan yet, providing relief to farmers, especially African-American farmers. Republicans are not providing relief to African-American farmers. If anything, you had about 11 white farmers, 11 lawsuits to block the debt forgiveness that was in the American Rescue Plan for farmers of color, including African-American farmers. Republicans are against that. Making critical investments in Black families and communities in the American Rescue Plan, historic expansion of the child tax credit, cutting child poverty to record lows for Black children. Okay. Supporting child care providers and reducing child care costs for Black families. The American Rescue Plan tripled the earned income tax credit for 17 million workers without dependent children. Helping Black Americans stay in homes. There was $25 billion in rental assistance that people stay in their homes. Black Americans were the largest group that received this help, representing more than 40% of aid recipients. This is stuff Republicans don't want to deal with. And people like Craig DeLuz, they don't want to talk about this. They're not going to tell you about this document. Who has showed you this document? Who has told you about this besides me and the African History Network? Go read this. The Biden-Harris administration advances equity and opportunity for Black Americans and communities across the country. This is why when I was reading the executive summary of Project 21, I knew it was garbage. I knew it was nonsense. And that was before Craig even came on the show, and then he came on the show, and then I was right. It's a bunch of nonsense. Okay. All right, look, we have to get out of here. You can support the African History Network, $, the AH Show through Cash App, $, the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/show. We have a page of our website also. Okay, remember, right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not until we win, Wakanda forever. And we'll talk to you next. Peace. Be sure to visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, and register for our 12-week online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So when you go to our website, you'll scroll down, you'll see the information for my radio show, the African History Network show, and you'll see our social media platforms as well. And also, we have our Cash App and PayPal information there also, so you can support the African History Network. We have the 15 lecture digital download bundle pack, African History Awakens the African Mind for Mental Death. That's on sale for a very limited time, only at $50. It's a $150 value. That's 15 of my lectures. And then we have the digital download of my latest lecture I did November 19th. Dealing with the new Black Panther movie, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Analysis, African and Mesoamerican Culture, a Shared History. That's on sale, $10. And we also have the information dealing with our 12-week online class, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So we deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. We do this class on Wednesdays, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Our next class is Wednesday, December 14th, 2022. The class is regularly $130, is on sale $60. So we do the class live. All the sessions are archived and recorded, so you can go back and watch it anytime. So a year from now, 2 years from now, you can go back and watch the entire class. Click right here for to register. Register here. You can use your debit card, credit card, or PayPal. And I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips, and we go through and look at this history chronologically. You can also use this with your children as well. I would say the information is PG-13, so it's not overly graphic. I don't do a lot of cursing or things like that, okay? And then on Tuesdays, I teach from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. Okay, our next class is Tuesday, December 13th, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Same format for this class as well. And it's on sale $60, regularly $130. And we start in the year 1800, looking at the 1800 census. And then we look at the Louisiana Purchase and the Haitian Revolution, because those two events are related. And we go through and look at history chronologically leading up to the Civil War, which starts April 12, 1861. We look at what leads to the Civil War taking place. We look at things like the Mexican-American War and the Missouri Compromise of 1820. We deal with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo of 1848. We look at the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. And we go through a look at history chronologically that leads up to the Civil War taking place. Then we look at the Civil War, the Reconstruction era, the Compromise of 1877, which ends Reconstruction. We look at the Jim Crow era, Great Migration, which is 1915 to 1970, World War I, World War II, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power movement, okay? To better understand what happened after slavery ended, to understand how we got to where we are today, to understand where we need to go from here. Okay, so that's from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. I teach this class on Tuesdays, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so you can join us in our next class. And we also have both classes in a bundle pack, okay? So you get both classes for $100. It's a fantastic value. It makes a great gift, whether you celebrate Christmas or Kwanzaa. This is a over $260 value for only $100. Click right here for register here. And if you've taken any of my online classes in the past, email me at ahnshow@theafricanhistorynetwork.com, ahnshow@theafricanhistorynetwork.com, and you get a 50% discount. Or just click on Contact the African History Network, and right at the top of the page on the menu, and you can email us right through the website. Okay. All right. So once again, we do the sessions live, all the sessions recorded. So a year from now, 2 years from now, you can go back and watch the entire class. And as soon as you register, you can watch last week's class and the previous sessions. All right. So be sure to register for this class, and we'll see you in our next class. And we do the sessions live. We have a live text chat in the class. You can see me, I can't see you. So it's not like a Zoom meeting at work or anything like that. Okay. And then